Hello. Today I'm finishing up a quick look I've been having at some white wines made from Chenin Blanc by the Mullineux family in Swartland. So we've tried a number of dry wines, and today I'm looking at their straw wines, the 2023 vintage of that. So a little half bottle here. This is a Chenin Blanc, but it's been made from grapes that have been dried to concentrate them prior to fermentation. The Mullineux family have been making wine in Swartland since 2007 and very quickly risen to be one of the leading wine producers of the region, in fact of South Africa. During that 18-year period, they've on 5 times evidently won the Winery of the Year award from the highly respected South African wine publication John Platter's Guide. So they've been fortunate enough to work with some of the old established vineyards of the region. Evidently many vineyards were planted in Swartland in the 1960s to provide for something of a boom, and originally most of them were used to produce entry-level wines. And the winemaking was done by cooperatives or large groups. Now there are many fantastic old vineyards in the region, and the Mullineux make good use of this. Their approach to viticulture is entirely sustainable, and in the winery they aim to make their wine as naturally as possible, using low intervention regimes. Something I'd not realised previously was the fact that actually on the label there, what I thought might have been some sort of ammonite is actually a millstone. So that's in relation to the name Mullineux, referring to miller. So the straw wine is a sweet wine produced by drying the grapes. What the Mullineux do is they take 2 of their vineyards, one in the Paardeberg and one on the Kasteelberg, and these are vineyards that contribute naturally quite high acidity that helps to give balance to the finished wine. The Paardeberg vineyard comprises vines that are 42 years old and is planted on schist soils, whereas the Kasteelberg vineyard has 46-year-old vines and is planted on granite soils. So I presume these are relatively high altitude vineyards, given the fact that they seem to retain acidity in the fruit well. Both the soil types referred to are low vigour soils. They'll be low in nutrients and they'll have a poor water holding capacity. So that will help to enhance the naturally low yields that you'll get from fully mature older vines. They say when they harvest this they get about 4 tonnes per hectare, which is a low yield. Having said that, when they've dried the fruit, they actually only get 5 hectolitres of juice per hectare of vines. As I say, the fruit is 100% Chenin Blanc, and this was harvested between the 6th and the 10th of February in 2023. Now, picking goes on at the same ripeness that they would normally pick a wine to become dry table. The sweetness is a result of the grapes being dried for between 16 and 30 days. And this drying goes on in the shade, it's not in full sunlight, and the aim is to get halfway towards a raisin. So by doing this, they're allowing water to escape from the grapes, and that's concentrating both the sugar and the acidity in the fruit, and that enables them to make a balanced sweet wine. Once they finish drying, the grapes go as whole bunches through the crusher and then they're pressed, and the concentrated sticky juice is put into old 225 litre French oak barriques, and their fermentation is allowed to start using the indigenous yeasts that have come with the fruit into the winery from the vineyards. So potentially each barrique could be fermenting at a different pace with different yeast strains at different stages of its fermentation. These are all individual fermentations going on. Given the very sweet nature of the juice, this is a very slow fermentation. They don't intervene and they allow the fermentation to stop when the yeasts have consumed all the sugar that they can. So in total, fermentation lasted 11 months in barrel. At the end of this, the wine was racked off its yeast lees, was blended and bottled, and it was bottled without fining or filtration. So let's have a look at it, shall we? Firstly, there's a lovely pale to medium gold colour there. Swirl-it. Now the wine actually only has 7.5% alcohol, which is not unusual for a wine that's been fermented using an indigenous yeast. They won't necessarily be as vigorous as a cultured yeast, and in a minimal input situation where they won't have been fed with any nutrients to keep the fermentation going, we're left with plentiful sweetness. I believe I'm right in saying that the sweetness on this wine is 336 grams per litre, which will make it at least twice as sweet as most sauternes, for instance. So let's see what we think of the aroma, shall we? The aromas are rich, ripe, sweet, peach apricot. The aromas have a sort of a slightly unctuous, maybe oily nature. There are almost notes of honey. There are lifted floral notes, honeysuckle perhaps. It almost smells as if it's got some botrytis complexity there, but obviously it hasn't. So let's have a taste. On the palate, the wine's richness is apparent immediately. This is relatively full-bodied, but actually I'm getting an intense peach and apricot nectar note on the tip of my tongue, but at the same time there's a freshness that comes through on the front of the palate that gives this a wonderful liveliness. It lingers quite nicely, although the finish is much more honeyed and rounded, and the wine does finish relatively sweet. As I say, there's a richness, and the oiliness that was prefigured in the aromas is apparent on the palate. However, the alcohol isn't adding a warmth and a weight to the back palate, so there's quite a delicacy to the finish. Those fresh peachy notes last really well, and actually they're showing some delicate floral and blossom notes that are just opening up on the finish very nicely. The wine's concentration is helping it to last very well, and its freshness, although it's not sufficient to stop the wine from finishing relatively sweet, is sufficient to give a liveliness and a lift to that fruit on the end there. And there are some lovely notes on the finish. This is not simply peachy honeyed nectar. The fruit flavours are beautifully persistent, and I'm getting notes of almond, perhaps candied peel, just sitting on top of that. I think this is a very young wine as of yet, and I think almost certainly you could keep it in your cellar for 10 to 15 years, probably longer. It's almost certainly a wine that will gain a lot more complexity given 5 or 6 years in bottle. So I think in ideal circumstances you would leave it for that length of time before opening it. I took a look at the Wine Search aggregated critic score for this vintage of this wine, and it scored 96 out of 100. A very impressive score, and I think possibly one that is taking into account the way that it will develop. I think perhaps the additional aspects that I'm looking forward to seeing as this wine opens up with age are what would take me to that score at any rate. Certainly the wine has a wonderful intensity, it has an elegance and a balance that really mark it out as something quite special. Obviously wines like this don't tend to be cheap. I will leave a link in the notes below to the Wine Searcher webpage for this vintage of this wine, so you can see what price it's available at and whether it's available in your market. But although most of us will think this is a fairly expensive wine, I think maybe if we think back to the fact that they only got 5 hectolitres of juice per hectare of vineyard from this wine, I think we can see how the price of the wine can be justified. I also think the quality of the wine that's been made from that justifies that entirely. So thank you so much for watching. I do hope you found the video of interest. If you have, do please press the like button. If you would like to watch more of our videos, do please sign up and subscribe to our channel. It would be fantastic to have your support, and that way you can set yourself a notification and you can be alerted every time we publish a new tasting video. If you have any friends you think might like to watch the video, do please pass it on. That would be a fantastic endorsement coming from you. If you have any feedback, please pop your comments in the box below. We'd really be interested to hear from you what you think about the wines we're looking at, the tastings we're doing, or anything else that relates to that. So once again, thank you for watching, and I do hope you'll make some time soon and come and join us for another tasting. Until then, bye for now.